Hey guys, it's Dan and welcome back to another episode of Make That Feature, where we have a look at creating some cool, awesome interactions using Unity. So in the last one, we finished up by just tidying up our hierarchy a little bit, just to keep it all organized. We also made these cool, awesome cubes that when you click on them, it has an interactable script, which we created last time. Tells you what kind of interactable it is, and a bit of description about it as well. And now we can use this to go ahead and create the screen that pops up when you click on one of these that allows you to investigate it, like games you've seen such as Tomb Raider and Uncharted. If you remember, we're raycasting from our camera, from this raycast object. So when we press our selection button, which is our left mouse button press, it then launches the raycaster script, fires out a ray, and then asks the ray manager to do something with it. Here's our raycaster script doing all the raycasty things. But you can see here, it sends out, it asks our ray manager to determine what to do with what we've hit. The raycast manager looks at it and it has a look to see if it's got an interactable script on it. And if it does, then it's going to enable the object interactions. And then our interactable script looks at what kind of object it is. Is it a weapon? Is it a power-up? Or is it a collectible? And then it's going to do a certain task depending on what item it is. And this is where we're going to fire off our investigation manager. So let's have a look at creating that today. So let's go ahead and start creating our investigation elements that we need. So what happens when we click on one of those objects? We want it to go to almost like a black screen that contains all the details of the objects that we've clicked, the collected artifact, and maybe like a picture of it that we can interact with, or actually like a 3D model that we can rotate. So we're going to need a couple of elements to do that. As you can see in my hierarchy here, I've got this investigation section which we're going to build up in this episode. So we're going to right click, I'm going to create empty, and we're going to call this investigation manager. And on here, this will be where our script will sit in a second. But we also are going to need a camera, because we're not going to use our player controller's camera to see what we've collected. We're going to use a new camera, a different one. So we go ahead, right click in the hierarchy and create a camera. And we'll call this investigation camera. And for ease, let's just put it at 0, 0, 0. And we're also going to need a canvas. Put all our text and stuff on and other things. So we'll go ahead and go UI and go create canvas. And we'll call this investigation canvas. So let's go ahead and set some of these up. Let's click on investigation canvas. And it's going to be screen space overlay. We're not going to touch anything there. But we could change the UI scale mode to scale with screen size. And let's give it a reference resolution of 1920 by 1080. You see if it's there when we double click it. And for a minute, let's just go ahead and just bung in some UI text Match Pro, and import TMP Essentials. And we've got some text we can move around. Then we can give it a title. Artifact investigation. It sounds very important. Boom. That'll do for the moment. And we can go ahead and turn that off because we don't want it on all the time. Then moving up to our investigation camera. At the moment, this camera is looking into our scene and it's rendering everything. We can actually have some control over this camera to just render stuff or display stuff on the screen on a particular layer. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new layer. We're going to go add layer. And in an empty box, just type in the word, let's say artefact, or the artefact layer. And then you have to click back on the camera. And then where you can scroll down to culling mask. At the moment it says everything. I'm going to select nothing and then put it on artifact layer. So this is only going to draw 3D objects that are on the artifact layer. As you can see from that camera now, in the little box, we can't see anything. But if we were to put it back on everything, it draws all the 3D objects in the scene. And then I'm going to put it back to nothing and artifact layer. Under clear flags, we're going to change it to solid color and we're going to make it black. And that's our camera all set up. Let's go to our scripts folder, right click, create C# script, and we'll call this investigation manager. And when that finally compiles, you drag and drop it onto the investigation manager. Like so. I'm going to put that at 0, 0. So under our investigation, we've got our investigation manager with our currently empty investigation manager script on it. We've got our investigation camera, which is only rendering stuff on the artifact layer. and we have a canvas as well. So we'll go ahead and double click our investigation manager and open that up in Visual Studio. So let's get started with the investigation manager, and all this is going to do is more or less control just toggling things on and off. But first of all, we need to be able to get easy access to the investigation manager. There's a couple of ways we can do that. In each of the if this is the interactable script and it sits on the interactables, and we could create a variable here called investigation manager and give it a variable name and then call it that way. But if we've got a lot of collectible objects in our scene, we don't want to have to keep wiring that up manually in the inspector by dragging and dropping the investigation manager in. You would also have to put in a start method here, or a wake to you could do it automatically by using find game object of type, and then that's how you could populate the investigation manager. I'm actually going to be using a singleton for this tutorial for the investigation manager. So it's going to be a static instance of the investigation manager class that gives us easy access to this class from other classes. So to start that, we're going to go private static. There's only one of them exists for this instance, more I. And then we're going to create a public version of that instance by going public static investigation manager instance with a big I, curly braces. We're going to get another curly brace, and we want to return our instance with the small I. We don't need our start and update methods, so we can go ahead and remove those. We'll need an awake method. Let's go ahead and start typing awake. I'm going to say if instance is equal to null. So basically setting this property now. If this doesn't exist, which it won't do when we first run the game, an instance is going to be equal to this. But if there is already an instance running in the game for whatever reason, we will destroy this one because there's already one that exists. Don't worry too much about that for now. This just allows us to get hold of the investigation manager from another class, which we'll see in a second. All we've done is set up our singleton. Next up, we're going to need some variables. So all I've done there, I didn't know if you knew this, but you can click on the little minus icon and it's going to make that little awake method a lot smaller. But yeah, our variables. First of all, we're going to need access to our cameras to be able to toggle between our player camera and our investigation camera. So we're going to create a new section here called cameras. In the header, it just creates a title in the inspector. These don't need to be public, but we do need to be able to in the inspector, so we'll make them serialized fields. Private game object. First of all, we want to get hold of the main camera. Then we also want to get our investigation camera. One thing we're also going to need to set up are our interaction buttons. So once we pop up our investigation panel, we're going to need to close it. And because we're using the new input system, we're going to need to get hold of an input action reference. So we'll put serialized field, private, and that's going to be of type input action reference, but we need to use namespace for that, so we're going to put Unity engine dot input system. Drop that down and type input system action reference. Here it is at the bottom of the list. This is going to be called our back button. So how are we going to create a link to this investigation manager and pop up our UI and all our bits and pieces that we need? We're going to need to create a method. Call this one activate investigation. So say public void activate investigation, and we're going to need to pass it a parameter. And the activate investigation is going to need to know what interactable we've clicked on. We have a script called interactable which holds that information, so we'll use that here. We'll say interactable, and we'll give it the variable name of object or investigation. So this we'll keep coming back to this script throughout the lesson and adding to it. But essentially what we want to do, as soon as we activate our investigation screen, we want to deactivate our main camera. So we're going to say main camera dot set active, say false, turns it off, and we'll turn our investigation camera on. So say investigation dot set active true. So what else do we need to do? Well, we also need to turn on our canvas for our investigation. Let's create another section. Let's create a header, call this canvas element, Again, serialize fields, private, canvas, call this the investigation canvas. So we also need to turn that on. We can say investigation canvas dot game object set active. So that's going to turn things on. So let's jump back into Unity and wire some of these variables up. So you can see our investigation manager here is populated with our variables. Let's start from the top. We'll go for the main camera, which is going to be up here. We've got our main camera just here, so we'll drag and drop that into the slot. What's this now about our investigation camera? So we'll drag that in just there, and that needs to be off as well. So we've got our main camera, investigation camera, and then it needs to know an interaction button. It wants our back button. What is the button we're going to press when we want to close down that investigation screen? We're going to need to, you can click on here and it's going to show you all the current input actions that we've got. We've got jump, look, move, raycast, and sprint. That's not really something we're going to need, so we're going to create our own one. So we just need to find out where these input action references are, which I think on this is going to be in the starter assets input system, and you can see here we've got input actions for, click on the starter assets, which brings up the input action manager. And now we want to create a new action. We'll go ahead and create a new one. We'll call this close. You could call it close investigation. It could be a little bit more generic. Whenever you want to like go back in your game, create like a back button. Call it back button. It's going to be an action type button, and let's give it a binding. So we need to give it a path. It's going to be keyboard by character map to key, and then we just want to choose a key that we can use as our back button. Maybe B for back. And this is going to be in our control scheme for keyboard and mouse. We can go ahead and save that, close it down, go back to our investigation manager, select the little target for the back button, and then you see here we have player, back button. Go ahead and use that one. And then last but not least, all we need to do is drag in our investigation canvas, like so. Now we need, though, however, to tell our interactable how to access the interaction manager. So jump back into Visual Studio, and you want to get your interactable script. If you don't have this, then you can get it by double-clicking on the interactable, on one of the interactable objects. Double-click there. And we already laid the foundations of this code in our last lesson. But where we're switching here, when we're determining what type of interactable object this is, we can remove the debug.log for collectible, and this is where the power of the singleton, the static instance of our investigation manager, really becomes useful, because to access the investigation manager, all we need to do now is type investigation manager .instance and dot, and then the name of our method, which is going to be the activate investigation. If you remember, we need to pass it an interactable. So very simply, we want to pass it this interactable that we've clicked on, so we just need to type this, which is going to send up across this instance of our interactable class attached to the game objects that we've clicked on. I'll go ahead and save that there. As soon as the second we click on this cube, it's going to look at this switch statement, determine what type of collectible it is, which we've used in enum, say what type of interactable object we are. It's going to tell our investigation manager all about it, and then it's going to call this method activate investigation. But at the moment, there's no way of actually closing it down. Once it opens up, we need to just hook up our back button. So we're going to need to listen for that button press. So we're going to use on enable and on disable, first of all. So on enable, we want to listen to our back button. So we'll say back button dot action dot formed. So once that button has been pressed, we can go ahead and close the investigation. This is a method that we're referencing here, the close investigation, which we haven't written yet. You can go ahead, put your mouse on the line and hit Control, full stop, come up with a list. We can generate the method investigation manager close investigation. Just put it right below, and we can use on disable to stop listening for that action. So we can say back button dot action dot performs minus equals close investigation. I'm not going to use an on enable or on disable again, so I'm going to create these as expression bodies. I can go ahead, press Control and full stop, back button, and you can see it's got use expression body for methods. Let's go ahead and do that for both of them. So once we want to close down our investigation panel, press our back button. It's going to call the close investigation method, and we're going to need to shut it all down here. So what we're going to do pretty much the opposite of what activate investigation does. So we want to close our investigation camera. So we can say investigation camera dot set active false. We don't want to see that camera anymore. We do want to turn our main camera back on. Don't need our investigation camera set. So this is the foundation of getting this to work. So let's go ahead and test to see what we've got works already, because we should now be able to actually walk around our scene, click on things, bring up the activation manager, bring up the investigation manager, and close it again. So let's go ahead. So it's got to our cube. Click on our cube. There we go. It brings up our artifact investigation screen. Pretty bland at the moment. We're not really investigating very much. Into the black abyss, but we'll be able to populate this with information. We'll go ahead and press B, which is our close button, and which closes down that investigation panel. Then test out our other cube. Boom, artifact investigation. B, close it down. So that's all working. Great job. You will notice that we need to turn off our HUD as well, because we're left with the little reticule in the center of the screen. And these are all bits that you're going to find as you go through. I'm just tweaking objects. So let's go ahead and have a quick look at that now before we move on to the next stage. So we're going to need, under our canvas elements, serialize fields on another canvas, but this one is going to be our HUD. So as you can probably guess, we want to turn it off when we activate. So we can say HUD dot game object set active to false. And then when we close our investigation, we want to turn it back on. So as you can see, really simple, just turning things off and on at the moment. Let's go ahead, wire that up, go to our investigation manager, HUD. We don't want that one to be on when we're investigating. Go up to it, boom, you can see our little reticle goes now, and click on that one, boom. Oh, so we're ready to move to the next stage. Let's have a look at populating our canvas with the artifact details. So let's turn on our canvas, our game view. So this is our canvas. Tricky to see at the moment. I'm just going to temporarily drop a panel in there. Background quick. Turn this off when we don't need it. It's just so it makes it easier to see what we're doing. There we go. So I'm going to put a note here. Turn off. Let's add some little extras to this. Let's go ahead and put in a little message. Just going to duplicate this. Say press B, close. But this is for you to design as what you need, really. It's as custom as you like. If you think about what we've got on our interactable objects, we've got the title of the object and we've got a description. So in our artifact investigation, we can create two text fields. So let's duplicate this one. And we'll call this title. Over here, it's up middle, artifact title. This will change because we'll be reading it in from our object. This is so we can see it laid out here. Make that centered. Copy that. Drop it down. This is our description. A bit bigger. Give this a title of description. And we'll make it left aligned. Better name. Breeze. To close. This one main title page. So a bit organized there. Looking good. That's all we kind of really need on that. Go ahead now and turn off the background while we're just designing it, and turning off then the main canvas. Go ahead, save. And back in our investigation manager, we're going to need to know about those two elements that we just created for our title and our text boxes. So let's drop back into Visual Studio. So we're using Text Mesh Pro. We're going to use a namespace. We'll put using TM Pro. Colon. And on the canvas elements, we can put serialized fields, private, text mesh, pro UGUI. We'll call this one title box. Copy all of that. Save my fingers. And we'll call this one, you guessed it, description box. So when we activate our canvas, we're going to need to populate these two text boxes with content. Let's go ahead and do that now. You probably would want to do that before you turn the investigation camera on. We're just going to drop it here just for the sake of ease. See what we're doing, makes it a little bit more linear. So we can say we want to, let's populate our title. I can't speak today. Let's populate our title box. We want that title box text element, which is going to be equal to the interactable title name, which we're actually passing to it as a parameter here, called object for investigation. So object for investigation. The title is contained within the interactable info title, which is just there. That it literally is as easy as that, and we'll do the same for the description. Get hold of the text element. That is also going to be equal to the object for investigation, but we want the interactable description. I spelled it wrong. I put description. What a moron. So go ahead and save that. So let's jump back to Unity, and we're just going to need to populate it with the title box and description box from our canvas. So go title and description. Nice. So let's give that a whirl. Go ahead and hit play. Run up to our interactable, click on it, and it says lost artifact. Last artifact dates back to pre-human times. Cool, it's working. Let's press B to close. Go ahead and test this one. Oh, a rare crystal. A very rare crystal made by Walter White. Go ahead and close that. Nice. So it's starting to take shape now. Apart from lacking a little bit of design on my my canvas, you can see where we're going. This is up to you to get creative and do what you want here. But you can see how we're populating it. So next up, let's take a look at instantiating the object that we've clicked on, so that we can see it here in our investigation screen as a 3D object, not just an image. So let's have a look at that next. So next up, we're going to create the functionality to allow whatever object we've clicked on to come into that activate or investigation object view. And that has to be dynamic, so whatever object we click on has to then inform the investigation manager what it is, and we can then instantiate it in the view. But we need to create a transform to allow that to work properly. We need to tell the investigation manager where we want to instantiate this new game object. So if we see, double click on our camera in the scene, our investigation camera, you can see it's just here at 000. We are going to instantiate our game object quite close, and we're going to adjust the scale of it as well. We're going to create a transform. So right click, create empty, and we'll reset its position to 0. I will go ahead and call this investigated object position, and we're just going to move it out the way of the camera a little bit. For a minute, let's just turn the player off, really in the way. So we got our camera just here. There goes our camera. Make the gizmos a little smaller so we see what's going on. So that's our camera, and our object position is right on that, which is no good. So we're just going to move it out to about there. Now we'll go ahead and we'll add a box collider onto this, and we'll make it a little bit smaller. This is going to help us visualize that area. In fact, let's just make it uniform. Let's go 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. And we want it to kind of be, this position to kind of be offset from the center of the screen, because this is going to be drawn right in the middle of the screen from this camera. So just move it over to the left, and then when our canvas pops up, the 3D object will be on the left hand side of the screen. This might be something that we have to kind of play around with. And we don't want this object to be too big. At the moment it's got scale 1:1:1. We only really want stuff to be, let's say, this might take a bit of filling depending on how far you've pulled the object position away from the camera. But let's say we want everything that comes in to be 30 centimeters. So that gives us a position and space in which to instantiate. We can leave this turned on, and we'll also give it the layer of artifact layer. We want the camera to be able to see it. So let's go ahead and set up our investigation manager to put the game object to that place. I'm just going to make sure I turn my player capture back on and go back to Visual Studio. Here we are back in our investigation manager. Let's go ahead and create a new header, and this is going to be for our object position. And then below we can do another serialized field. This is a transform, and we'll call this object position. So we're now going to need to instantiate this game object. So we'll do this in our activate investigation. So as soon as we activate our investigation, we want to create our object. And to do that, we're going to store that in a variable called investigated object, and we're going to say we want to instantiate our object for investigation, because that's what we're passing into our class here. This is what we've clicked on, object for investigation. So the object for investigation, remember, is the script we're passing to our investigation manager. It's an interactable script, and the interactable script sits on a game object, and we want to instantiate that game object. So we could say whatever game object this class is attached to, we want to create. So object for investigation dot game object, and we're going to put it at our object position, and our object position dot rotation. Don't forget, we also need our object position. It's a transform, so we need to tell it it's that position. And then with that game object, we want to put it inside a parent for later on, and that's going to be our object position that we just created. So investigated object dot transform dot parent, so we want to give it a new parent, is equal to the object position. So that will instantiate it, but when we go around and we click on something else, we don't want that to still be there, which it will be. So one way to make sure that it's empty before we go ahead and instantiate another one is to destroy whatever's inside our object position. So we can do that by getting the children. There should only be one, so we can say get child 0, and we'll destroy that game object. So we're making sure that our object position, that transform we just created in the Unity scene, it's got no children, it's empty. And then when we go ahead and activate an investigation, it's going to instantiate it and place it inside that investigated object. This will also help if you want to do anything like rotate the game object around as well. We can just put all our scripts on the game objects in the scene we just created. So let's go ahead and give this a test. So back in Unity, if we go ahead and click on the investigation manager, and we'll drag in our object position right there. I think we're good to go. Let's give it a whirl and run up to our cube. Boom. Interesting. No cube. Why? Let's have a look. Control Shift P to pause. There's our cube. So it's actually done what it's supposed to do, is put it in that position. But you can probably already see the problem, and that is that it needs to be on the artifact layer, which I was hoping it would inherit from the parent, but clearly it does not. But not to fear. What we will do is, because this camera here attached to our head is its color mask is set to everything, it also sees everything on the artifact layer. So we could just go over to our cubies and change the layer to artifact layer. You might have different layers for like your weapons or whatever. So when you go ahead now and click play, run over to our cube, boom, now we can see all the cubes in the scene. But we can see the main cube, which is perfect, that's what we want. Let's close back and we'll go ahead and have a look at that. So we can fix that little error. Because we know this camera is always at position 0, we don't actually need it to render very far. We only need it to render out as far as where our cube was, which is just there. So we can click on our camera, and we can change the clipping plane. Let's go a bit closer to 0.1, but for the far, we can say it's less than half a meter. So then it's not going to draw everything in the distance. We know the camera's always going to be here. And as long as there's nothing near here that is on the artifact layer, which very rarely it would be, then you're going to be absolutely good to go. Let's give that another test. You can see we probably haven't pushed out that range far enough. You can see there, typical, look, see the camera's just outside that range. Let's try and extend that to 1 meter. And now you can see it's popped into our game view. So we'll push that far limit to 1 meter. We probably need to move it over to the left a little bit. Just work on the position. And then I think we're there. So let's go over to that investigate object position. Just nudge it over a little bit. We probably could have done this in edit mode actually. I'll show you how to do that. So let's say we want to adjust it, and rather than keep going backwards and forwards, we can go click on one of our cubes, and I'm going to pause mine quickly. That's by pressing Control Shift and P. Take off maximize on plate. Just drag it over a bit. So you can now see our screen is here. We're just going to move this over a little bit, and maybe we can rotate it here so it comes in a little bit diagonal as well. And before we uncheck play, let's go ahead and go click on the three little dot menu and go copy component and come out of play. You see it reverts back to its original position. We can then go ahead and click on the three dots and go paste component values, and you can see it's moved into its new position. And now when we go and give it a play, see it's in a much better position, and then you can really do what you want kind of from here on in. So super conscious of this lesson getting too long. We have actually kind of done out what we wanted to do, and that was run around the scene and click on something and then have a screen pop up giving you some information about it. But what I'll do is, as a bonus lesson within the next couple of weeks, just show you how you can take this a step further and just create that rotation on the game object when you are investigating it. So when you run up here and you click on something like this cube, you can then in this screen use the same keys, I guess, just to rotate the artifact around, just to have a look around it, like in Tomb Raider. B to go back, and also that when you hover over, when you're running around and you hover, you get a little pop-up saying it's a collectible, and to press the left mouse button to click. We'll do that as like a little bonus lesson within the next couple of weeks. So thanks very much for watching. I really hope you found it useful and learned a few tips, maybe some tricks that helps you out in building your own games. So until the next video, I'll see you then.